post charts too.
I have a question actually.
Yeah, go
On
for it.
the appointment.rb file, like the one where you made the self.all and then some, I was a little bit confused about what to put in the curly brackets.
In the oh, okay, we
It
can
said
look
like
at it.
ID and then appointment ID.
Yeah, I mean,
do you
that's
think we could finish that appointments controller too?
finish the appointments control. Oh, today?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll finish it
Okay.
today because we just did like a get, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did the it wasn't appointments, it was something else, but
It was
the
grades.
grids, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely finish that. So, but let's kind of just so there's a question about going over just that all and then some method. So we'll look at that. Going over finishing out the grades controller, which we'll do today. Anything else? If they come up, yeah, and as we're going through this, when they come up, just obviously feel free to ask. But so yeah, let's just kind of do like a review, just kind of maybe more like without code, just what the has many through relationship is, and kind of how to think about it. So this is also called a many to many relationship. It's when you have one model of something having many of the other, and that other model has many of the other thing. And you see this all the time. It's pretty common. So yeah, what your homework was yesterday is, you have physicians and patients. And they, obviously a physician has many patients and a patient can have many physicians. Now in to do this in like a database world, we need a join table. And in this case, we call this table appointments. And the important thing here is we're keeping track of the ID of the physician and the ID of the patient. We can add another field on here if we wanted, like for example, this would be like an appointment date. So this would kind of make our app a little more, fancy, because now we can have this concept of having appointments. I kind of want to just look at, let's say we didn't have that date, it would still work. Like the appointment, the date of the appointment. Let's just come in here and say we had doctors and, patients. Let's keep this really simple. Patient has a name, a doctor has a name. It's going to have an ID too. And then in here, we could have a doctor ID and a patient ID. And those would be foreign keys. And then we don't need anything else. Now, I kind of want, what I'm kind of getting at here is this would work, right? This is it's very minimal, but like this is enough information to like have this has many, or the many to many relationship. And sometimes you'll see, this join table where all it really has is the two foreign keys of the table it's trying to join. So sometimes if you see this, what we'll end up calling this table is like you'll just kind of combine the two names of the table. So this is like the doctor, patients table. Now it doesn't have that appointment information, but this would still have if I came in here and created some data. So let's say this is like doctor's data. So we have a name, we have an ID. So we have like Dr. Bob and Dr. Sally. And then we'd have like, I don't need, maybe it's not letting me create anymore. It's not letting me do the copy paste. Okay, and then we could have some, patients. That'd be like ID and name. 1, 2, George and Gina. All right. New. It's going to make me delete the table. Okay, so then we'd have our doctors, patients, information. Actually, this one I want to have 3. So this is how like it would look when we actually had some data in our database. And this could be like let's just do doctor ID right here. And patient underscore ID. So tell me what patients, like if this is, so here's how our database would be set up. Doctor has many doctor patients. A patient has many doctor patients, and a doctor has many patients through doctor patients. I call that doctors patients, but so you tell me, like, so then we go and populate our database. We have some data. So tell me who are Gina's doctors? Just by looking at this.
Dr. Bob and Dr. Sally. It just looks like it's both Bob and Sally for.
Yeah, because Gina has the ID 2, so she's in here, and she has a doctor with ID 1 and 2, so that's Bob and Sally. George, there he's in here once. Looks like George only has, Bob. And then with your homework, we added, so we don't need it. Like this is like at a minimum, this is what we need. But a lot of times you can add extra stuff here, like you did at date. It's in the future. Now you might see like, because if you didn't have a date, you probably would never want to see like, here we know George has Dr. Bob, like, their patients. But now since we have this extra attribute, we might see the combo of those two in here again. So if I like insert, come on, let me insert a row. So yeah, so now I could say like Dr. Bob and George have an appointment on, you know, March 3rd of 2022. They also have an appointment on 6/3 of 2022. But that's how like it's going to get stored in your database. Does that make sense? And then what we're doing today is we have user, like a user can have many skill and a skill can have many users. And we're going to combine these through the grades table, where we can give each person like a score. So not only are they associated, but now we can add an extra attribute of like giving them a score. So here we have like Bob and Sally, JS and Ruby. We can look at like, you know, Bob has a 70 on Ruby. So these join tables, their main purpose is to keep track of these foreign keys. And then if we want, we can add additional data for, you know, the given use case. And then, yeah, in Rails, it's always going to be like, this is always going to be the same, like has many, and then the name of the model that you have many of, and then, or sorry, this join table. So a physician has many appointments. Physician already also has many patients, but it's through this appointments table, because that's how we're keeping track of who the like physician or the doctor's patients are, is through this join table. Same thing with the grades. It's like the way I'm keeping track of, you know, the user has many skills. I actually need to go in through the grades table to see what skills they actually have. Another example would be like a college course or like a school or like Neo, where you have a user has many courses and a course has many users. But once again, you do this through this join table, you know, where they both have the user ID and the course ID. And this one where you're adding an additional column, the role. So you could go ahead, you could keep information about like, oh, I'm in this course as a student, or I'm in this course as a teacher or a TA, etc. So when we create like one of those like join table models, or like we need both the IDs of the two things that have many of each other. So these are going to be required. So for our example with like the user and skill, when we're creating a grade, we need to have both of those IDs. And they both need to be valid IDs of a user in your database and a skill in your database. Like they must exist in your database, or we won't be able to create a grade. And you know, that makes sense. It's like we shouldn't be able to create a grade if we don't have a user or a skill that's already in our database. How would you do that in a real world? How do you give someone who doesn't exist a grade on something? Or how would you give someone a grade on a skill that doesn't exist? It doesn't make any sense. Cool. Any questions just on just kind of like a high level, this association? I think if you can understand like how it works on like the table layer, it's like necessary to then it's going to be easier to code. Cool. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and open up iTerm. Go ahead and CD into where your project is. Let's just kind of get this set up. All right. Something I like to do is just, get it up, like kind of get it running. Just kind of review what we did. So I'll start up my server, CD into client, start. And then I need to React that. Okay, so we use the starter app. We also have, we're just getting, some raw data right now. And notice with this, like we have like a spinner working, or not a, we have some loading UI working, and that was all part of like this use Axios hook. We're going to go into more detail about that today. And yeah, we'll go from there. So we'll kind of build it out ourselves, maybe to get a little more understanding about how it works. And then yesterday there was a question about JSON, so I do maybe want to spend just a quick second on JSON and just what it is and why we use it. But it's relatively straightforward, but we'll talk about JSON today. And cool. So yeah, pretty much right now though, all we're doing is we're just doing get actions. We're just getting them. But if we look at our code, we kind of spent some time, like if we look at like our grades, our home, and our users and skills, we're using this use Axios hook to kind of, in a clean way, do our Axios calls on mount. And then we're also reusing this Axios container component that really for now, what it's essentially what this is doing, like this component, is where we are handling like some loading UI. And technically error too. Like, because we're checking to see if we're loading. And then we're checking to see if we have an error. And if we don't, we just return a card with a title. Now, why would I want to do this here instead of just doing this like, let's just go to my skills. Like, why don't I just do this right here?
Then you can do it on every single page, right? Instead of having to manually do that.
Yeah. So there's that part. It's like now I don't have to do this in multiple components. Another thing that we'll probably do today is, I mean, this just says loading spinner. That's not the greatest, right? Maybe I want like an actual spinner in here. Like we go create a spinner component. Now, if I don't have this all in one spot, well, then I need to like copy and paste this here. I need to copy and paste this there. And like, I'd have to go through and copy, like do that wherever this is being used. But if I kind of can organize it in such a way where, you know, I can reuse it here. Now I'm only going to need to change it right here. So now I can say loading better. Let's say we make a better spinner. And I think I did not save this. Because like this one's going to be, it's better because it's like, it's going to have like color, it's pink. It's going to be awesome. So now it's like loading the better spinner, and like the stylings chart changed. If I go to the users, like it's there. If I go to the skills, you can't really see it, but it was there, it like flashes, and the pink one's there. And I changed it in one spot. Because something maybe I don't like right here, and this is easier to see in the grades. I don't like how these, it doesn't really, it doesn't show the name of the, like the title. Like it should still be able to say grades, but then the loading should be right here. So it's like yesterday, maybe I didn't design this so good, or like, and this happens all the time where you like code something and then you get it working, and then like a couple months later, we want to change it. So what I want to have, I want to see like the title of this component or like this card showing, but then the loading down here. So I'm going to need to change this up a little bit. I'm going to do like, maybe create a function right here, render body. Const render body. And then this is where I can do this check. So I changed this up a little. So now when I go to like my grades, see, now I have that title there, and then I'm going to have my spinner. And maybe that's just how I want it, because that's what like my project manager told me I had to do. And he says he wants it for all the pages. Go to my users. Now that works. My skills, it's showing that. But I had to just change the code in one place, and then those changes propagated.
So you just called the render body function inside the return underneath the title. And
Well,
that
what I
caught-
had is I had these if statements here, like at like the top level in this function. So if loading's true, it's just going to return this one paragraph. If there's an error, it's going to return that one paragraph. If not, it will return the card. Well, that's not how I want to do it. I want to, like, this is why I created a function to handle this. Because now, regardless, I'm going to render the card. It's just right here. This part's going to be conditionally rendered if we're loading error and we have children.
Okay.
And then this way, because, you know, if we have an error, like for our users, we misspell something, it still says user, but then the error is down here. And I still have my card. Maybe
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
But this is more about like, this is why it's nice to reuse this container, because, you know, I would have had to made those, if I didn't reuse that logic, I would have had to redo that in 3 different spots. And, you know, as your app gets bigger, it might be 10 different spots. And this might not be just a quick little simple, you know, 4 lines of code. It might be like 40 lines of code. So, all right, let's look at our other component, this stringify JSON. So this one's pretty simple. It just takes some JSON and it stringifies it. So this might ask the question like, well, what is JSON? JSON just stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's just it's a way to like kind of format data. It's based on JavaScript. It's kind of based on JavaScript objects, but it's really not, it's not a JavaScript object. You can kind of think of it as JavaScript objects that's been like converted to a string. And let's not even think about Rails or backend or any of that stuff right now. Let's just think about JavaScript. So I'm going to go into Node. And I'm going to create an object in JavaScript. So just call it X. Let's do like person. Let's make this a little more realistic. So I have name, Bob, and age. So I have this person. And I can do like person dot name, right? Person dot age. Cool. And I'll just throw this in here. I'll do a little tutorial right here. So we have objects in JavaScript. We also have what's called JSON. JavaScript object notation. And there's actually a couple, there's one notation. There's actually a JSON file an important JSON file in our project, and that is the package.json. So if I go to my client folder, where is it? I can't find it. I'm just going to search for package.json. There we go. So look, this looks like an object, like a JavaScript object. There's a couple differences, like the keys are going to be in double quotes. So that's one difference. Like it's not quite a JavaScript object. It's just JSON. It's just a way to format some text. So how do we like format some JSON, or how do we do it? Like I can take this JSON object. Like this is just a helper in JavaScript. It's like this object, this thing that we can perform actions with. And I can do like a JSON.parse. And I can pass this a JavaScript object. So like my person. And let's store this to a variable person JSON equals this. JSON dot unexpected token O. What doesn't like about this? Let's see here. Unexpected token O. Let me see, build X. What's this? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. Duh. So what we've been using is we've been using stringify, where we take a JavaScript object and we stringify it. So we can do JSON.stringify. We can pass it a JavaScript object. And this will convert it to JSON. So you can kind of think of it as like JSON's a way to represent an object in a string. I could do this like let y equal that type of y, it's just a string. But I can go the other way. I can do JSON.parse y. The other way, so we can have like, say like let person string equal this, and then I can do a JSON.parse person string, and that gives us an object, a JavaScript object back. So it's kind of, this JSON is, you know, in just in JavaScript, it's a way we can take objects, kind of convert them to strings, and take these strings and convert them to objects. Now, there's a specific format to JSON. Like I can't just do like, well, this is going to show why I can't use the single quotes, because I'm using the single quotes here, and now that's going to like escape that string. And yeah, I can't like have that outside of us. Like, I mean, that's a, let's do it this way, where I don't have the keys inside of strings. So we'll just say person string 1. Let's just do this in here. So there I get an error. This is like a syntax error. This is a syntax error. This is invalid JSON.
Is JSON only used with JavaScript then?
No, we use it Rails.
Okay, or is like there a similar kind of thing that's used with like Ruby or something, or is you can just use JSON with Ruby then?
Yeah, every language probably uses JSON. It's just this like format. It's like this object looking stuff where our objects are in strings. We can actually even do like, let's go back, throw in like in our person, or like we can have like an array in here. So we could do like quotes. Let's just, yeah, let's do like fave nums. 1, 2, 3. Like it will, if I take that array, I need to call this something different. Like JSON knows how, like this JSON.stringify, it knows how to take a JavaScript object and, you know, convert it into a string. But this string has a JSON format. And so if you have JSON format, it can take it and put it back into a JavaScript object. And other languages could take JSON and like Ruby could take JSON and convert it to a hash, like in Ruby. Because this is like most languages are going to have like key value pair stores. So they're going to know how to work with JSON. So but where this comes in with like web stuff is this is a good way to send data, right? Just like, because string, you're going to want to send it like as in a simple form. And this is essentially just like a string or just text. So you can send it as text. You're not going to want to send like Ruby's not going to want to send data as like a Ruby hash, because then it's not going to work in like JavaScript, because JavaScript doesn't know what a Ruby hash is. So Ruby's going to take their hash and it's going to convert it to JSON, and then it will send the JSON, and then let whoever is using that JSON figure out how to utilize it. Because this is pretty generic, right? Like any coding language could figure out how to like take this and then convert it into what they need to do. And that's what we don't do this in our Axios call. Axios does this for us, but when Rails gives us back this JSON, you could think about Axios just taking that JSON and parsing it into, where is this broken? That shouldn't be broken if. How did I break this? Oh, I keep on doing this wrong. Sorry, JSON dot. So we have person one. So that's already in. So here would be like Rails. I know I'm in JavaScript, but like Rails would have this hash, and then it would be like, okay, I need to send this. So it'd be like JSON dot stringify. Let's stringify the person one. Boom. And then let's send that data, because this is just, some plain text. And then when JavaScript gets this, they'd be, okay, let's do a JSON dot, let's parse this stringify or this JSON. And then we'll convert it into like our like JavaScript's object. Does that? Because like, let's do this. Let's go to like my Rails app. Let's go to like my, I don't know, skills controller. Let's do this. If I say like person equals, name, and that's like John, age is 2, and then render JSON person. So now we're in Rails. So what type of data is person?
It's an object.
It's not an object. because that's JavaScript. I mean, technically,
Oh,
everything,
it a hash.
yeah, everything in Ruby is an object, so that's technically, it is an object. But yeah, it's a person is a hash.
Yeah, that's right. For some reason, I thought we were still in.
Yeah, the word object is especially, yeah, it's getting very, very confusing. But so now we do render JSON person. So what's happening here is we're taking our hash and we're going to convert it to JSON. And then we're going to send it. So like behind the scenes. Now, can I do a JSON dot stringify here?
I don't think so.
No,
Yeah.
but this is a just JSON dot stringify. That's a JavaScript thing.
I had to do a render JSON. Right.
Yeah, there's, I don't know, let's see, exit, let's go into IRB. So now I type IRB, now I'm in Rails. So let's do person, yeah, person dot class, that's a hash. I wonder if there is like a, what's going on with that? That's new. I don't know what's going on with that style. Do they have a JSON? I don't know, there's probably a way to convert this to JSON on here. Why don't we just Google it? Convert hash to JSON Ruby. Yeah, I thought there'd be like a to JSON method on there. Looks like we might have to like require something and then use that. And then, yeah, it might give us, something that looks like this. These backslashes would be like to escape these strings, but that would be JSON. Yeah, it looks like if we can require JSON, we can maybe do that. So, but Ruby's gonna have its own way to like take a hash, convert it to JSON. But our controller knows how to render JSON, and it'll just take our hash and will convert it for us to JSON. So here, person is a hash, is converted to JSON and is sent to client. And then in our client, I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on here with this use Axios. So we go do the API call. We say, hey, go give me the skills or give me the users. We hit the server does their stuff, and it's going to send us back the data as JSON. But Axios is going to like, JSON's not really, it's a good way to like send and receive data, but it's not really workable because it's just a string. So Axios inside of here, before it gives us back this variable data, it's going to convert it to a JavaScript object for us, so we don't have to. So there's kind of some, within the code, there's some steps, like get back JSON data from server, and then Axios, you know, we'll call like the parse method to convert to JS object, which is what we want, because then we can, if it's an array, then we can loop over it. If it's an object, we can like drill into it. We can't really do much with just JSON, but it's a good valid way to send and receive data, because it's kind of language agnostic. I know it's called JavaScript object notation, but it's not really specific to JavaScript. And then what we do here with our stringify method is we take, and I named this wrong. Okay. So now that I'm looking at this, I named this incorrectly. So this works. The stringify method takes an object and converts it to JSON. So I should call this like a JS object or something. So I kind of I named that bad, because this is not really JSON. This is actually a JavaScript object that it's going to take. And we're going to convert. So I'll say this converts a JavaScript object to JSON. Why do I want to do this? Let's say I come in here, I have a object. There you go. Or let's just say like let person. Let's do it outside of here. So let person equal name Tony 21. And I want to come in here and I just want to render Tony. Like, I mean, this works, right? I can, let me just, so I'm in my skills. I have a name. Here's Tony. We do this all the time. This works. 1,000 skills. Did I stop my server? Have an error. Put on the console. Unexpected token. Oh my gosh, where's that going to come from? Oh, it's coming from here. Okay, so that works. I can render Tony. Like tone, like this name variable is just a string. But if I do person, I get an error. Objects are not valid as React child. I can't just render a JavaScript object in React. React doesn't like that. But what I can do is I can convert this to JSON, which is just a string. I can stringify this object, and now I can see it. So the whole point of this component is so I can, you know, quickly render data, you know, an object. out an error. Because my other option is to like actually go do. How come I don't have any skills? What the hell's going on? Because the other option is to like go through and like go build out a UI. So this is really just a quick way to go through and, render your data that you're getting back. But now I'm not getting any. I think I like have broken something unintentionally. What did I change here? Oh. So I changed the name of this prop, right? Because I had it called JSON. And I was like, what, that's really not JSON. That's I'm just gonna call this data. Really what this is like gonna be a JavaScript object. Like data is a JavaScript object. But I changed the name and now this is not working in any of my components. Well, that's because now this component, the prop name is not JSON, it's data. So I need to go change all of that, or if I use that to data. Which even though that's a pain, I think that's worth it because that's more descriptive of what this is. And there we go. See, I'm taking a JavaScript object, I'm converting it to JSON, which now you can see like the ID has the double quotes around it. So this is just a string. And it's just a quick way to see if my get was working, because the next thing I'm going to have to do is go through and loop through this array. So for the takeaway on JSON, we have objects in JavaScripts, hashes in Ruby. What are they called, like dictionaries in Java? That are kind of like really just, they're essentially just key value pairs. But what we can do is we can take those, we can convert them to JSON. So in JavaScript, we do that with the JSON.stringify method. Convert JS object to JSON is going to be this. We can do this in other languages too. It's not going to be JSON.stringify, with their own methods. All right, and we can also go the other way. We can take JSON and convert to JavaScript object. And that's going to be JSON.parse. And this one's the JSON. That's why I renamed that. I actually had it reversed. Then JSON param must be valid JSON. And we saw that here. If I try to parse something that's not valid JSON, I mean, this is just a string, but it doesn't have the valid JSON format. It's not going to work. Cool. Sweet. Let's go ahead. Let's take a break here. Any questions on JSON? Nope. Cool. Let's take a break. Let's come back at 11. I'll push this up to GitHub. I'm also going to throw a link out, like a W3 school. Like it, JSON's pretty straightforward. Just kind of got to like run these, like it's really the parse and stringify functions. It's like just going back and forth between these two kind of datas. I'll throw out a little W3 school. They have a good little section on it. Cool. See you back in 13.
Sounds good. Thanks.